Hello there, everyone. I am your host, the Sea Monster, and I welcome you all to my essay video on Godzilla Final Wars. Directed by Ryuki Kitamura, Final Wars was the sixth and concluding entry in the Millennium era of Godzilla films, and it was intended to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the King of the Monsters himself. To preface this, I must admit that I have a pretty complex, complicated relationship with Godzilla Final Wars. On the one hand, I personally really enjoy it as a piece of pure spectacle that goes for being an action-packed, explosive grand finale for the Millennium era, or even, as it may have been initially intended to be, the entire franchise, by packing in as many recognizable faces from the franchise as possible while showcasing why Godzilla will always be the baddest big boy in town. Heck, I highlighted a scene in this film as a favorite of mine in the franchise during a previous edition of One Monstrous Moment. So, that alone should clue you fine folks in to the fact that I do have a sizable amount of fondness for this film. But, on the other hand, once we look beyond the spectacle, what Godzilla Final Wars has to offer is arguably some of the sloppiest writing in the entire franchise. And given how much I talked about Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah being an utter mess, saying a similar sentiment about Final Wars is quite telling, regardless of its entertainment value. And perhaps its writing quality being arguably better than Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah. Maybe slightly. Maybe. It's not to say that it has no merits in its writing, but I wouldn't count on those merits being enough for me to call it an objectively solid film. And so, we're about to get a little bit further into why that's the case. So with all that said, time to hop into the Gotengo with Captain Gordon and company, and drill into this film. No, not like that. Stop it.
I would just like to say that before we start, Sea Monster, I absolutely hate you. You made me watch Godzilla Final Wars.
What do you mean? It's the pinnacle of cinema.
So yeah, I kind of fall somewhere in the middle, like somewhere between. I'll probably be even between like UC Animus and I guess Kaiju Kuro or whoever else will pretty much have the most positive view of the movie, where like I pretty much definitely have fondness of it. I pretty much do think it's it's entertaining, but I definitely don't. But I will say, like on a script level, yeah, I don't think that this movie's gonna hold up very well. So this will be a very fun stream. This is gonna be really interesting.
I think Omniviewer had it on point the most when he said it's like X-Men meets The Matrix meets Dragon Ball Z. And I noticed a couple of. I want to add. I don't know whether he mentioned them, but I definitely want to add Star Wars and Independence Day.
Yeah, and destroy all monsters. Pretty much, you can also say that much. Like destroy all monsters.
Yeah, actually, I suppose Final Wars actually lives up to the moniker of Destroy All Monsters more than Destroy All Monsters does.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty ironic, actually.
The premise for Godzilla Final Wars goes a bit like this. After being attacked by various kaiju over the course of a few decades, humanity came together to form the Earth Defense Force in order to finally conquer the threat. Which also included the infamous King of Monsters himself, Godzilla, who has literally been put on ice in Antarctica. Discoveries were also made of mutants, people with superhuman capabilities, which includes, but isn't limited to, our main protagonist Ozaki and his hot-headed comrade Kazama, who would go on to form a special unit called the M Organization. No, not the X-Men. But then suddenly, a cluster of monsters appear around the world and begin attacking various major cities. For Rodan in New York City and Anguirus in Shanghai, to Kamacuras in Paris, and even Zilla in Sydney, the world appears to be overwhelmed until a race of aliens called the Xiliens seemingly save it from the kaiju and promise to help humanity for any future threats. Now, of course, if anyone's familiar with the likes of Invasion of Astro Monster, which also featured a race of aliens called the Xiliens, or heck, just about any sci-fi story where an extraterrestrial race with highly advanced tech and power suddenly arrive on Earth with promises of a prosperous future for their new friends, it turns out that the Xiliens here have more ulterior motives, and those ulterior motives being to subvert the human race in order to turn it into their food supply. Once the Xiliens start eradicating the entire world with both their forces and the kaiju under their control, it's now up to the last remaining contingent of EDF personnel, consisting of, but not limited to, Ozaki, researcher Miyuki Otonashi, Kazama, and Captain Douglas Gordon of the Gotengo, to free Godzilla from his icy prison and use him to even their odds and go into a final war with the Xiliens. Oh, and going forward, folks, I get that the villain's name is the Xilien Controller, but since his predecessor was also technically the Xilien Controller before he was usurped, I'm gonna refer the younger guy as X, and the older guy as the Elder, just to avoid confusion. Hopefully that's okay with y'all. Anyways, on to the discussion proper. Now, under usual circumstances, I'd start with the plot and characters of whatever film that I cover. However, it's safe to say the characterization is minimal, save for a couple examples, and the plot will take me a while, let's just say. So for this particular case, I've elected to start things off by talking about how the film is done on the technical side of things, mostly in regards to its action sequences, as well as how the monster side of things is handled, since this is where the most amount of praise I have for the film can be found, and I feel like being positive first for this video, so yeah, let's just get right into it. Most of the action scenes revolve around our human and alien characters, which are very much reminiscent of The Matrix, from certain cinematography choices, like a spinning camera shot focusing on one particular moment that's been freeze-framed, and a strong emphasis on martial arts throughout the fight sequences, to certain moments that are taken wholesale from the Matrix films, i.e. Ozaki stopping a bunch of laser shots with telekinesis, similarly to how Neo does the same to a flurry of bullets in the original Matrix. There's also some similarities to X-Men in regards to the presence of superhumans that are literally referred to as mutants in this film, as well as certain styles of clothing being worn by certain characters in the film, which bleeds into the Matrix similarities as well. Nonetheless, the fight sequences are very well choreographed, and the cinematography and special effects do well to emphasize the superhuman nature of the characters that are involved in these scenes, such as when they showcase the agility and raw power that the mutants and Xiliens wield as they fight. The color grading certainly could have been improved during some scenes, especially during the motorcycle sequence, which looks so overly exposed in daylight that I wouldn't fault anyone for calling it an eyesore, but overall the fight sequences are pretty well done and lend to the entertainment factor in the whole thing. And for as easy as it is to see the similarities between this film and others that were more popular at the time, I would not consider this film solely as an attempt by Toho to follow certain trends at the time in order to move away from the Godzilla franchise, but instead, I would more consider it as a film that, despite the trend chasing, was still an earnest tribute to Godzilla films of the past that was also aiming to be much more action-packed and style-oriented than any G film that came before it, as a way to celebrate Godzilla's half-centennial with the biggest bang imaginable. Granted, it was at the cost of a logically sound, coherent script, but still, there is that sense of the film being made by people who loved the franchise and wanted to send it off in the most grand and spectacular way possible. Now, in terms of how the monsters are done, while most of them don't get much screen time at all, it is admittedly nice to see a good number of them make a return to the big screen after a long hiatus, and with some great designs to boot, many of which stay true to the classic Showa designs while still being unique enough to where it's hard to mistake them for any other design. Some of them, like Anguirus and Rodan, even get to have some standout moments here and there, such as how Anguirus can curl up into a big spiky ball and bounce around, wreaking havoc and dodging attacks from the EDF. Then you have Gigan, who gets a really awesome and unique design, resembling a xenomorph from the Alien franchise and really emphasizing both his extraterrestrial and cybernetic attributes, arguably more so than his original Showa design. Sadly though, seeing such an abundance of returning kaiju is a bit of a double-edged sword, where, to paraphrase Venom, so many of them, yet so little time to devote to them. We also get Monster X, who later becomes Kaiser Ghidorah, who spices things up a bit as a more unique take on King Ghidorah. The quadrupedal design and asymmetrical heads adds a bit more flavor to this take on the three-headed monster, but good lord, those wings are way too small for his sheer body size. It's like, why even bother having them at this point? They look so small and useless. And in regards to how Godzilla's done, I will concede that it would have been nice if he had faced a little bit more of a challenge from some of the foes that he fights in order to allow for some monsters like Gigan or Anguirus, Rodan, and King Caesar to get some licks on him, or for monsters like Kamacuras, who happens to have a camouflage ability, to catch him a bit more off guard before he eventually defeats them. Sure, we do get Monster X, who clearly demonstrates a great deal of power and is able to be a match for him, but the fact that Godzilla was able to defeat all the other monsters with such ease up to this point kind of makes this final boss type of scenario seem a bit unearned. Even so, Godzilla is done justice here as this ultimate force of nature that has given humanity a run for its money for many years, which started as a result of a fire caused by humanity, which was vaguely detailed by the grandfather during one scene. Godzilla's sheer power and ferocity is displayed quite well, and there is also this ever-growing fire within him that motivates him to go forward and fight until there's no more fight to be had. The fire in Godzilla's eye during his first fight with Gigan can even be seen as tying back to the wrongs which mankind had brought onto the world that motivates the king into waging his never-ending war. I also appreciate the detail in his character that he's willing to kill Zilla, Kamacuras, Kumanga, and Hedorah, just to name a few, but he goes for a more non-lethal method in beating Anguirus, Rodan, and King Caesar as a nod to how those three were his allies back in the Showa era. Though it would have been nice if there was just a little bit more elaboration on that detail within the film's canon. And admittedly, it is entertaining to watch Godzilla laying the smackdown on his fellow Kaiju alumni, warts and all. Is he a bit overpowered, one may say? Oh yes, especially once he survives having Monster X's meteor form blow up in his face, resulting in a huge crater in Tokyo, with him still standing without so much as a scratch on him. But still, I like this Godzilla a lot for how much of a big bad lizard boy he is, who leaves no quarter, at least for the most part, and he boasts a lean but fierce design that stands out as a personal favorite of mine in the greater franchise. And yes, it's funny seeing Zilla getting nuked by Godzilla as a joking jab at Godzilla 98, while a Sum 41 song titled We're All to Blame plays with lyrics pertaining to how much of a disappointment 98 Go G was as an iteration of the Big G. Everyone and their grandpa has brought it up, and it can't be a Final Wars video without some mention of it, I guess, so there you go, folks. We also have Mothra in this film, who seems really just kind of tacked on, and her rivalry against Gigan is barely a factor in the plot, even by the time the two finally cross paths during the final act, after Gigan got rebuilt by the Xiliens out of the blue, which had to happen because Godzilla killed him the first time back in Area G. In fact, Mothra and all of her related elements seem to exist only because our heroes have to use a talisman from Infant Island during a crucial moment in the story. I don't mind seeing Mothra in this film, considering that she has been a prominent figure in the franchise, and it would make sense to include her in this film since its conceit was to be a half-centennial celebration of Godzilla, but it still would have been better if she was more well integrated into the narrative. Also, not only is it strange how quickly the Xiliens were able to fix up and upgrade Gigan just in time for the final battle, especially to go up against Mothra, but it's even stranger for Ibira to show back up, all healed up, after having been shot up and had even lost both a claw and an eye to Ozaki and Kozama's team earlier in the film, and there isn't even prosthetics on Ibira for his claw and eye. Like it's as if he never even lost them in the first place. We don't even get some throwaway line about how he got them back. It's as if he may have had some regenerative abilities that the film never even bothers telling us about. So, overall, the monster stuff isn't exactly handled the best or as well as it could have been, but it does lend to some entertaining kaiju action, whether it involves a bunch of kaiju wreaking havoc around the globe, or Godzilla kicking ass and taking names. Even for as cheesy as these set pieces can get, like when Godzilla bats Anguirus into Rodan like a volleyball, and then King Caesar kicks Anguirus towards Godzilla, only for the Big G to do a dive out of the way, there is a level of energy and fun that I can't help but smile at when I'm watching these set pieces.
Maybe the Shin Godzilla comparison wasn't the most apt. Maybe it's more apt to compare this film's writing to GVK.
I don't know, Shin Godzilla's pretty bad.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
Well, I'm harsh. Look, I'm harsh on Shin Godzilla. I
At
don't
least,
think it's
at
that
least
great
Godzilla
myself,
Final
but-
Wars has character.
Yes, it does.
Oh wait, no, the Shin fans, they'll be like, oh, but that was the point.
Bloody thing. One of the
yeah,
points in the video I've put in there is Godzilla 98, his emotionality directs his actions, i.e. he wants to have a family, so that's why he goes to New York to find somewhere safe for his kids. He's feeding them, that's why he's getting all the food. He's trying to protect them. He gets sad when they die. He gets angry when they die. That's what eventually leads to his death, because he's so angry he doesn't really notice the dangers around him, which he does earlier in the film when he's a bit, I remember them shooting at me earlier, I better not do this. With Shin Godzilla, you have no idea where he's going. You have no idea why he's going that way. You have no clue what's going on with him, which could have been informed by emotionality. But because he's a walking brick, nobody knows what the fuck he's doing. Oh, to link back my emotionality thing with Final Wars, Godzilla chasing the sub-plane drill thing is the reason. His emotionality for hating that is the reason why he ends up following it and then going around the world fighting all the monsters. So emotionality is important in films and can be logical and direct narratives.
Yeah, I mean, there is like this sort of exposition done from the grandpa saying like explaining why Godzilla hates humanity, because something happened that made Godzilla like hate humanity pretty much. Like some fire that happened and it burned everything, and it's so vague pretty much. But even then, like it's at least it's in the movie and we can be able to hear it, as opposed to just being in a song that isn't, where the lyrics are barely audible.
Yeah, I did like that bit, to be honest, when you got the little kid and the granddad, and he says, "Oh, why is Godzilla destroying everything?" He's like, "Well, Sonny Jim, whatever the bloody hell your name is, yeah, humanity did some bad stuff and burned the world, and now Godzilla's pissed off about it. He'll never forgive humans." And it's like just a very somber explanation of it, like, yeah, this is kind of a thing. Yeah, we kind of cocked up, and this is a thing now. I kind of like that, despite it being very on the nose and in your face. I did kind of like it.
Yeah, and despite the fact that it's pretty much been placed in through like this subplot involving this old guy and his grandson and Minula, that I don't know if we want to get into that.
Which is really weird. that whole thing was just so weird. Like, the world is ending, and then suddenly, Granddad with a rifle, really. Granddad with a rifle. Why? And why is Minilla there? Minla?
Because they needed to make as many callbacks to the Showa era as they humanly could. So I guess Final Wars Gigan is a great design.
I really did Gigan's design in Final Wars. Pretty dope.
One of my favorite. So I don't know if any of y'all saw it online, but for the G-Fest costume parade, have any of you seen Chainsaw Man?
Yeah.
Someone did like a Denji Chainsaw Man outfit with modified Gigan, and I'm like, that was amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like, I really liked the original Showa Gigan pretty much, but yeah, Final Wars Gigan definitely, it pretty much gets across a lot more of like how, the fact that he is pretty much like a biomechanical monster pretty much, with all, like, as Omniviewer says, like, he's pretty much like an HR geek, looks like HR Geiger's sort of work. He pretty much like Gigan mixed with a xenomorph pretty much, and yeah, that's awesome.
All the biomechanical stuff, like how the original Xenomorph suit literally had screws in the thigh. I guess for all the monsters that got redesigns, I honestly don't think there was a single miss. Actually, there was one miss, King Caesar. But like, aside from him, I generally think 2000 Final Wars had just some of the best kaiju designs.
Yeah, I really dig Anguirus' design in it. I dig Rodan's design in it. Ibira has a pretty cool design. Hedorah, all 10 seconds of him had a cool design.
I wasn't a fan of Ghidorah in that, it must be said. I really didn't like that. If Ghidra had grown from the was it X Monster X or whatever it was called,
Monster X.
if Ghidra had grown straight from that with the same sort of style and design to it and made it look like a very weird looking Ghidra that's very like skeletal, I think I would have preferred that much more to the incredibly weird sort of bloated version that came out of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I would say the wings. I'm not a fan of the wings on Kaiser Ghidorah. Like it's like they look pretty much impractical. Like because they look way too small for something that big. Pretty much, it's like, well, what's even the point of them?
I never liked the look of Ghidra as a quadruped. I think he suits better as a biped.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, like the quadruped thing isn't much of a turnoff for me, but yeah, I mean, I definitely would prefer bipedal Ghidra.
Why did they move Godzilla 98 to Sydney rather than New York? I mean, surely that's obvious way.
Like it's obvious. Like it was right there. It's like low hanging fruit.
Yeah, they dude, were your legs broken that day? The fruit was hanging so low it was on the ground and you didn't get it.
Exactly.
Yeah, that was kind of.
That is actually a good question. I've never thought of that, but if I had to guess, it's because New York is so far out of the way from Antarctica. It just wouldn't make sense for them to go to Sydney, then New York, then New Guinea. When you think about that, it would make absolutely no sense because that is a massive detour.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess that would kind of make. I guess.
But Rodan was able to travel from New York to.
Well, that's
to Guinea.
Because it's Rodan.
But Zilla could also swim.
Well, no. Here's the thing: in the context of Final Wars, they were basically just teleported in and out by basically the Xiliens. So.
Yeah. I know that, but Zilla could still swim there after destroying New York, and then meet up with Godzilla and get New Guinea. He could meet up with Godzilla in New Guinea, or was that in New Guinea?
You're talking about like if they didn't put Zilla in New York in the destruction sequence.
Yes.
Oh, I thought like you wanted Godzilla to fight Zilla in New York.
Oh no. No,
okay,
that wouldn't make any sense.
That makes so much more sense. Yeah, why didn't they do that?
Like I could just imagine my head like Zilla just attacks New York, goes to New Guinea, and instead of killing Kamacuras, Zilla gets impaled.
So there's like this whole thing about Gigan, like, they've discovered Gigan and they pretty much determined that he's an alien, and they're like all surprised by that. So, but meanwhile, Hedorah is also in this world pretty much. So what would that make in Hedorah? As he was established.
Hedorah's just like I think I'm pretty sure Hedorah's just a shit monster in the movie.
Yeah, but I mean, in the original film, he was like an alien, so it just kind of.
Yeah, I know, but like he's just there and he's covered in shit.
Yeah, I don't know.
I like to imagine that he's just I like to imagine that he's just a monster, like a normal monster. Then he just got covered in shit.
Oh, like oh god, what was the film? Cartoon anime. Wished Away. Is that the one I'm thinking of? Spirited Away.
Oh yeah, that monster. I remember.
The water spirit that was covered in shit, and then they washed it all off, and he turned back into a dragon. There's just Hedorah gets like there's a deleted scene, end credit scene where like Hedorah stands up and then all the sludge just falls off of him, and it's the woman from the Godzilla sequel that never was.
Is it just me, or does anyone think that Mothra just kind of seems a bit tacked on into this movie?
Oh god, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
That was
Yeah.
all very weird.
Like Mothra just appears out of nowhere, kinda. Like similar to
Yeah.
GXK in a way.
Again, yeah, it's very much like the monsters don't get enough time to fully be appreciated, and Mothra is just an absolute perfect example of just suddenly at one point you just go, oh, here's the twins praying, and oh, there's Mothra just shooting out of the island like a reverse meteor. I'm sorry, what? When was that? That's never been a thing.
Also,
And then
also
Mothra just
this might be a hot
zooms
take.
over.
This might be a hot take, but I think GXK kind of like at least GXK put a little bit more effort into establishing Mothra. I know both like very much misuse Mothra, but at least GXK kind of had setup, a little bit more setup. Not good setup, but better setup than Final Wars.
Not
I
much.
don't know if
Literally
I
had
go
like
that
one
far.
line of setup.
Yeah, yeah, it's debatable, but yeah.
So now, on to the writing in Godzilla Final Wars, which... how best to describe it? Well, for starters, let's discuss our villains of the story, the Xiliens, who are pretty IQ deficient. Unfortunately, they are pretty much the driving force of the story. So, the Xiliens' plan is to take over the Earth and enslave the human race, and the start of that plan is to unleash a bunch of kaiju all across the planet in order to weaken its military might. Okay, makes sense. They don't want their enemies to have enough means to stand up to them in the future, right? Well, after a little bit of mayhem is committed, they teleport the kaiju back into storage and make their presence known, introducing themselves and claiming to be mankind's saviors in order to form an alliance against a greater threat which they claim is a planet named Gorath that's making a direct course for Earth, spelling its doom. The whole thing with Gorath is essentially just a smokescreen because that planet doesn't even exist. The aliens also take credit for having rescued the Secretary General, played by Akira Takarada. More on that later. When really, they've just replaced him with an evil skinwalker version of him, and then they do the same for other high-ranking members of the EDF. So their plan is pretty similar to the Canamets from the Twilight Zone episode titled To Serve Man. Only it's much dumber. And I intend to go a bit deep into why. There's a particular section in the middle of the film which has so much to unpack in terms of what's wrong with it and all the issues that are raised in the plot that we just gotta go bit by bit, okay? Just bear with me on this. To set the stage, Anna Otonashi, the sister of Miyuki Otonashi, interviewed the Secretary General earlier in the story before his flight, which is where we seemingly witness his death. The Secretary General is then replaced by an Xilien doppelganger, and now that guy is sort of taking his place and essentially establishing the United Nations as the space nation, since the world and Xiliens are now going to be working together against a common threat that, as far as humanity is aware, exists, while the Xiliens are just kind of memeing on them in secret. The Otonashi sisters and Ozaki grow suspicious of the Secretary General, and so they try to come up and approach to him in order to speak with him. Next thing they know, the doppelganger is nearly murked by some random assassin who was able to stroll in all conspicuous looking, dressed up like he's attending a Sith Lord convention, and pulls out a knife of all things to try to kill who he thinks is the SG, who as far as the assassin is concerned has just become the Xilien's lackey. So why did this assassin decide to go about the attempt this way? Why did he choose to dress up like this? How could he possibly expect to not be halted immediately by any security personnel or police officer when this building is currently housing the most important political figure in the world, who will likely have some crazy radicals trying to kill him for siding with extraterrestrials? And why did he choose to use a knife instead of a gun, which could easily kill him from a longer distance to where he may even be able to get a bullet square in the SG's noggin? Oh right, because if this assassin used a gun instead of a knife, then the fake SG would then reveal his true self much earlier in the film than the writers would intend him to do so, thus revealing himself as an alien in a public space much earlier in the story, and we also wouldn't have the payoff of Anna, Miyuki, and Ozaki finding out that he's an Xilien after receiving a sample of his blood. Basically, this is a huge convenience for the plot, and that may just be the kindest way of putting it. But wait, there's more to the scene. After the assassination attempt fails and the assailant is arrested, the doppelganger starts to run away right after Anna tries to clean up his wound. He even becomes aggressive when she tries to tend to the wound. So I have to ask, if Anna, Miyuki, and Ozaki suspect that the SG is secretly an alien, what were they expecting to get from him to prove it, and how were they expecting him to, especially considering that the assassin just kind of came out of the blue for them? Was Anna just gonna keep asking the SG enough questions which only the real guy would answer, like about his dog, until the fake one just outright confesses that he's an alien spy? Were they just hoping that he would be willing to give them a sample of his DNA in any capacity? If the second question is the case, then they must be really stupid, because there's no chance in hell that the evil doppelganger was gonna be that stupid enough to consent to that. But then again, it seems that after they got his sample of his blood, the doppelganger never reports this to his superiors or any of his subordinates, so who really knows at this point? Oh, and another thing, why would the Xiliens not question whether or not mankind, despite being so technologically outmatched by them, would still have tech that's advanced enough to determine a sample DNA to be either human or Xilian? I get that some Xiliens think that the human race is nothing more than personal cattle, but what would compel certain other Xiliens to underestimate them in the first place? We're also still left with the conundrum of whether or not the doppelganger even told his superiors. If he didn't tell his superiors about the assassination attempt, why didn't he? Was he just scared, or was he stupid? If he did tell them, then why didn't the superiors do anything about it? I understand that the Xiliens wanted to do a more peaceful takeover by making themselves look like the good guys initially and slowly overthrow humanity through deception, like their Hydra and Captain America the Winter Soldier. So when the plan goes awry, X basically just goes off script once the jig is up and once he takes over. The problem, though, is that the way their plan here is executed is so poorly done, and the film doesn't acknowledge it whatsoever. So, if anything, X's way of doing things, which just involves mass genocide, just makes more sense in retrospect, because at least by surprise attacking and overwhelming humanity with monsters and ships, the Xiliens would be able to ensure a much more swift victory, which would mean that our heroes would either all be dead, or they'd all be stuck because the world leaders would all likely be dead, and even certain characters like Captain Gordon could end up being killed as a result of a sudden onslaught. In fact, once X takes over and sends monsters and his forces out to wreak havoc across the globe, it's very obvious that they're winning. They are clearly overwhelming humanity in every front. So why didn't they just go with this in the first place? Anyways, going back to the prospect of a peaceful takeover, so the Xiliens want to make humans into their cattle because they want to eat them, and they want to eat them for the mitochondria in their body cells, right? So why not have the Xiliens try to act like they're willing to help humans with stuff like, finding cures for various deadly diseases, or for stuff like cancer? And by doing so, they could ask for some humans to volunteer by offering some blood to them. I mean, humans have things like white blood cells, and those have mitochondria, so why shouldn't the Xiliens move to offer such a service regarding that? Now, best faith interpretation, I can understand if the Xiliens were planning on doing something like this down the road, but their plan was uncovered much sooner than anticipated, so they never even had the chance to do this. But that only just speaks volumes to how utterly inept they were at keeping their secret initial plot intact in the first place. Also, it's quite convenient that the Xiliens never found out about Godzilla at any point before the Gotengo frees him from Area G. Not before they invaded, or while they were collecting the other monsters, or even while they were infiltrating the EDF. It's kind of amusing that the Xiliens apparently did not at any point happen to stumble upon any info on Godzilla or Area G in the UN database, or even from overhearing some random conversation amongst any EDF or UN personnel during their time as infiltrators. Had they found out about Godzilla, they would have considered him as a potential hitch in their plan, and they would have tried to quell that potential as soon as possible. For example, when the Gotengo starts flying to Area G, the Xiliens would already be aware of what the crew was planning on doing, and so they would have some extra monsters like Rodan sent to assist Gigan in attacking the Gotengo before it could free Godzilla. Or even worse, if the Xiliens found out about Godzilla much earlier in the story, or even before the story kind of begins, they would have taken him and genetically restructured his DNA in order for it to have M-base, like they did with the other monsters, so that they could control him. And I don't even need to explain to you all how him being under the Xiliens' control would completely change the plot. Now here's a really good question. Even if the Xiliens were to underestimate Godzilla's power, after he kills Gigan, why didn't X start to suspect that the Gotengo is attempting to lure Godzilla to where the other monsters are and eventually to where the mothership is? Like they're fighting their way to the top. Why didn't X just have his forces sit and wait for the Gotengo and Godzilla to reach Tokyo, spring some monsters like Rodan and Kamacuras along with a barrage of fighters on the Gotengo and overwhelm it until it's destroyed, and then spring some more monsters along with Monster X and Gigan onto Godzilla and do the same to him? Or why didn't he even try to get one of his ships to beam Godzilla up and give him the same procedure that his forces gave to the other monsters by putting M-base in his DNA so that the Big G would be under Xilien control? Seriously, these guys have such great power at their disposal, yet they completely overlook what could be considered as such viable strategies in ensuring absolute victory. The hypotheticals I brought up would even be in line with X as a character. I get that he's supposed to be the type who underestimates his enemies, but unironically, his brute force method of conquering the Earth was shown to be quite effective. So why would he entertain the notion of having Godzilla fight the other monsters one at a time or even two or three at a time when we have been shown previously of other more viable tactics that we would have expected him to employ instead? So long story short, yeah, we've got some serious plot-breaking issues here, and that's just in one section of this video. But alas, that may not be all, as we will soon find out.
GSTE says, why would they kill all the humans if they wanted them for cattle?
That is only the first part of the Xiliens' plan that makes absolutely no sense.
The first part? Okay.
Because, like, here's the thing. Here's something I've realized, just because I know this. So they say they need mitochondria in order to survive in the film. But here's the thing. Mitochondria is not unique to humans on Earth. And not to mention, you can literally harvest it from us safely. We've done that.
Yeah.
Literally, you could say, like, hi, so it turns out there's something in your bodies that's literally our food. Could you please give it to us, and in exchange, we'll help you get rid of this huge fucking planet that's about to blow up your world.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much. As far as the Xiliens' plan in the film. So, now here's a little bit of a setup for you guys here. So let's just say that we're a bunch of people who after the United Nations have become the space nations because the Secretary General has like miraculously been saved seemingly by these Xiliens, and we're pretty much suspicious of him that he may be an alien because his eyes don't blink. He's not blinking his eyelids on the TV footage. But it's like, okay, well, maybe I don't know if this will be enough to convince anybody that he may or may not be an alien, so why don't we go see him for ourselves? So, what would be like a very viable way to be sure that he's an alien? I'm waiting for an answer.
asking the impersonal. To be fair, the way they go about it is a bit clunky, but what they end up doing in terms of she asks him personal details, which he just flat out gets wrong.
And then also,
right.
I feel like checking his
kind
blood was
of
also a
works,
pretty good start.
I suppose. EFAP did the series on, did it, or streaming it. Is it Secret Wars or Secret Invasion? Whatever the show was.
Yeah,
Secret
Secret
Invasion.
Invasion.
Well, they said, well, they basically worked out that the best way to figure out whether someone's a scroll or not is to remove is to either A, make them bleed, or B, remove a part of them. To which point EFAP just went, so if you cut people's hair, that would show whether they're a scroll or not. And theoretically, it wouldn't hurt a person, but it might hurt a scroll, because scroll doesn't have hair, so they would have to grow out a piece of their skin or something to make hair. And it's like, yeah, as soon as you've worked that out, it's like, yeah, you should be doing that to absolutely everybody you have any kind of like suspicion of. So with Final Wars, with the president or whatever he was, what was he, Secretary General?
Secretary General.
Yeah, I'm trying to. Obviously, the blood thing. They obviously work that out through that. But then, if you're suspicious of him, but you're not in any kind of authority to do anything about him, I mean, the personal detail things works fine. What ideas do you have?
Well, where I was here's the thing. Where I was kind of going with this is that, so in order for them to be able to know for certain that he's an alien, like as soon as the plot pretty much needs our characters to be, they pretty much have to get like a blood sample of him. So the film, just decides to have like this assassin who looks like Count Dracula, like walk into this building that this very renowned political figure, who's like probably the most renowned political figure on the planet, with no security to check up on him whatsoever, so that he could walk that so close enough to the Secretary General imposter to try to Julius Caesar his ass, without running the risk of It's oh my god. Yeah,
when I saw him come in, because I completely forgot this film's plot completely. When the Secretary General, the fake one, gets stopped by the main characters, and I saw the guy in the robe come in, I thought, oh, he must be like an alien handler who's coming over to do something or other. He was so obvious. I was like, he must be something to do with. No, he's just some random nutter who dressed up like he's like Dracula coming towards it, and nobody noticed. No, not the two security guards who were facing him, not the mutant with superpowers who was also facing him. Nobody noticed him.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy. And here's the thing. We pretty much had those. Now, it just makes us want. And now, after that's done, when the alien Secretary General imposter dude starts running away, pretty much, saying, "No, I'm fine. I'm fine. I don't need stitches. I don't need to go to a hospital or anything." And he starts running off. It begs the question: did he ever tell his superiors about what may have happened, and that some of his blood got spilled, and that there's a potential that the humans might find out that he's not the real Secretary General, that he's not a human? And that could potentially expose their plan.
Yeah, it does make you wonder, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I get the Xiliens are supposed to think, pretty much would believe that humans are kind of inferior to them, but surely they would be aware that humans have some technological means to where they would be, they're at a point where they could look at DNA at a microscopic level to know for certain whether or not someone is human.
And would have very least been something to warn about, oh, by the way, I lost some of my blood. I don't know if we want to keep track of that or something.
Yeah.
Even when she brought out the dog, they should have immediately said, "Oh, hang on a minute, what's she up to?" They should have done something rather than, "Oh, we're sorry, he's clearly having memory loss. Can you just tell him?"
Yeah. Basically, the aliens are just kind of the Xilian commanders are basically just kind of sitting there and letting this happen. And it's it'd be one thing if the younger guy pretty much would underestimate human intelligence intelligence, pretty much. But why would this have to mean that the older one would underestimate them as well? Like, isn't the point of the older guy being that, he's like, right isn't always right? That's kind of like he says, like, he who depends solely on power will eventually find out that power is turned against them to like his pupil. So like that's kind of foreshadowing of the younger god alien, pretty much his downfall, I guess.
Yeah, that was the lesson he had told him earlier, which again wouldn't have happened if he hadn't actually told the good guy about the power that he didn't know he had. It's so stupid.
Yeah.
But yeah, the whole reveal thing could have been the thing that I found really quite annoying, because he had the blood thing to say, hey, look, we've sort of proved that they are aliens. We are now not going to tell anybody about this. We're just going to keep it to ourselves. Then obviously the dog thing, which they could have done to double up on it, but they didn't. And they haven't told anybody about this. Oh god, why do they... I'm literally thinking of stuff and then trying to speak, and then other stuff comes along. They when the girl gets captured or found out by the two other people who were kidnapped, and then they get killed, and then Don of Frye does the biggest, strongest throw in human history to throw one of these aliens across the studio onto a stage. Like when the camera zooms out and you see how far he threw that alien, bloody hell.
Bro.
Yeah, at which point it's like, why have they got any of the other stuff? They've just got an alien body there.
Yeah,
and I wonder how heavy that was, because like, let's just assume that thing weighed about as much as Akira Takarada did. That is still a full person.
Yeah, and keep in mind, like, why weren't they stopped when they were carrying around this what obviously looks like a humanoid body?
Would you approach Don of Frye carrying an alien corpse?
You would probably
Don of Frye with a sword carrying a dead body.
No, he doesn't even have a sword in this. He doesn't even have the sword yet. That comes later.
I thought he did.
No,
okay.
The sword, no, he gets the sword from the Xilian bodyguard chick. So
no, she got it off of him.
Oh,
I'm pretty sure she got it off of him, and he got it back off her. I think. He was carrying it around for a while.
Okay,
and they never got to use it.
Oh, okay, maybe okay. All right. Maybe I missed that.
Like the young Xilien guy, like that kind of took over. He was fucking hilarious because he kept screaming every time his kaiju got killed.
Yeah, just throwing a temper tantrum. The funny thing about this, like the Xilien plan to just like infiltrate the governments and all that, it's like they pretty much the film wants to make a point that the young Xilien is like in the wrong for just like becoming so power hungry. She just want to destroy it, blow everything up. When really, like, the plan to just infiltrate the government, the government, that the older Xilien came up with, it's like makes even less sense in hindsight. Whereas like the young Xilien it's like, dude, just fucking take over the planet. Why are you trying to hide this?
No, like legit though, like it's like you guys are so powerful enough, you can just take over the planet. Why waste your time just trying to take over the government? Like not only that, but you got a fucking giant yellow Hydra on your side.
Well, it doesn't even show up yet. But you don't even need that. You don't even need that.
Well,
you don't even need Kaiser Ghidorah, pretty much. Like the fact that like it would have made more sense if they just aliens show up and they have like a whole bunch of kaiju under their control because of the M base and all that.
Right.
They just surprise attack them. It's like. The humanity would just be so screwed beyond words, pretty much.
Right.
Like the fact that they just pull this ruse and all that makes absolutely no goddamn sense.
Wait, I forgot. Does Kaiser Ghidorah appear at the end of the movie or the middle? I don't remember that.
Pretty much the last quarter of the movie.
Oh fuck. Okay, then yeah, I can see why. Okay, then yeah, there wouldn't be a point of Kaiser coming in then.
Yeah.
Like unless maybe like I guess maybe I guess Kaiser was there like, oh, just in case if they fail or something. I don't know.
Yeah, Vic is asking, did the original ruler want a more peaceful takeover? Here's the
I was
thing.
questioning that because like even though he was like trying to take over the government and stuff, I didn't know if he was like doing it peacefully or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly, here's the thing. Their plan is like so kind of vague beyond taking over the world and just enslaving humanity to be like a food supply. Like, I honestly am not even sure. I honestly don't even know. Like, there's like no nuance beyond that the original ruler kind of wanting a peaceful takeover, like it's to serve man, like from the Twilight Zone. It's so like kind of. I honestly am not even sure. Which is, again, like the logistics in terms of them infiltrating the government and all that in this convoluted way where so much could possibly go wrong. And they pretty much, and when something does potentially go wrong, like, oh, I don't know, humans getting a blood sample of one of their spies, pretty much, that's, pretending to be the Secretary General, they don't even seem to be aware of that or may not even care for some reason. For no reason. Which, either way is bad. But yeah, like meanwhile, whereas like if they just straight up pulled just did the whole like Vortac from Destroy All Monsters melee thing, where it's like we're just gonna send a bunch of monsters and our forces down, and we're just gonna and we're just basically just gonna anal rape the human race, pretty much to near extinction. It's like they might as well just do that. Because it makes more sense in the long run.
Of Monster Zero, Invasion of the Astro Monster, is that they pretend to be helping and then they get control of the monsters, and it's like, right, we have control of the monsters, so you guys are going to be our slaves now.
Yeah,
it's like they could have just done that.
There's also something I also want to question because I don't remember this, and I have no idea. They said that they were gonna enslave humanity and use them for their cattle. Were they actually going to eat humanity? Because that's the part I'm still confused on.
The Xiliens were after the mitochondria in our blood.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Which for some reason they had to kill us to get.
Yeah, and I think. Yeah, when if they wanted to do the peaceful takeover thing, they could have just been like, "Hey, can we have like a little bit of your blood?" Pretty much. I know it seems like a very vampire thing to do.
They could have just
it's like,
asked them, like, "Hey guys, can we just have like a quick little sample of your blood, please?"
Yeah, I mean, don't worry about that. We're not vampires or anything like that. What?
Now, on to discussing the world building and Final Wars for a bit here. I already mentioned how it's unexplained as to how Ibira got his eye and claw all healed back up, but there's also the question of where Minula came from. Minula just pops up out of the blue, and him and Godzilla's relationship is left unclear. Like, do these two even know each other? Considering that Minula seemed to not even know Godzilla all that well until when we see him, Kenta, and his grandpa watching the king tear through a town later on in the film, why would Godzilla even seem to care enough about Minula to acknowledge and accept his plea to forgive mankind and let bygones be bygones at the end? Also, Minula just suddenly learning to grow from human size to a much larger size as a callback to Godzilla's Revenge, which was a film that only introduced that ability on the basis of it being in the dreams of a child. No. Just no. Honestly, imagine how much better it would have been if Minula, the son of Godzilla, had his life be threatened by mankind, whether intentionally or otherwise, and that was what prompted Godzilla into going to war with humanity. And so, Minula, who has learned to come to forgive mankind over the course of the story, is able to convince his father to do the same and end the generational cycle of conflict between man and monster. That would have helped tie this subplot more organically into the main plot, as opposed to it coming off as a totally inconsistent distraction from the greater narrative surrounding it. I get that the film wanted to use Minula for more than just as another callback to the Showa era, and that it was trying to weave him into the story to where the film wouldn't really be able to end the way it does without him. But how we got him and how we got to this ending still requires some significant reworking in the lead up. Now, this isn't a major part of the world building, but it's still very much a head scratcher, let me just say. So, in the world of Final Wars, where would one get the idea to make a bunch of figures based on the likes of Mecha King Ghidorah, Space Godzilla, and Destroya, such as the ones that we see a kid play with in an earlier scene? How could these characters even exist if the film doesn't even suggest, for example, that Ghidorah was a thing before Kaiser Ghidorah entered the picture, or that Gigan existed thousands of years before anyone would even be aware of his existence? It'd be one thing if this was like Pacific Rim, where in that instance companies would make merchandise based on kaiju and Jaegers that the world in that film had already been introduced to. But the case of Final Wars makes no suggestion that something like Space Godzilla was a thing, nor is there any indication of what would even have inspired such a figure. Were there Godzilla films that introduced these monsters in-universe, where Godzilla and other monsters exist? This is such a confusing moment because while I get that this is like a nod to the meta of kids playing with Godzilla toys, which may or may not be a metaphor of the director using Godzilla and his monster alumni as props to throw into one another, without much of a cogent, coherent plot to speak of, it still raises questions on what is even happening in the world building of Final Wars aside from mutant humans being around the planet, aliens also existing, and also giant monsters existing. Now, one last thing about the world building, though this mainly pertains to where the film ends. So, Ozaki states that it's all just a new beginning once Godzilla leaves with Minilla and once all the fighting has stopped. So this begs the question of what exactly is even the state of the world at this point. Even though we've seen several major cities being totally annihilated, there's still other parts of the world that we haven't seen get destroyed. So what, is there even still a way for mankind to rebuild at this point? Even Captain Gordon said that the world's destroyed and the war's already lost before they start taking off to free Godzilla. Considering all the destruction and all the human death that has taken place, I mean, look no further than Tokyo by the end here, which is all just a crater thanks to Godzilla shooting at Monster X from earlier. And considering that we've seen people in various parts of the globe, even so much as watching and reacting to what's happening on the news at several points in the film, one can't help but wonder if we should have gotten some sort of montage of people hearing news of the Xiliens being defeated and perhaps celebrating to at least solidify that mankind has a chance to live on. As it is here, though, without that indication, it's just kind of odd that Ozaki just says this line without us being shown evidence that a new beginning may end up taking place outside of just him and company smiling and watching the sun rise in the middle of what used to be Tokyo. So, needless to say, the world building isn't exactly great either, and one can't help but beg some questions regarding it.
The state of the world right now, as the world as we know it in Final Wars, is functionally destroyed. It is just gone, just reduced to atoms. What is the government to do about it, and how are they going to go about, fixing everything? Because Godzilla left a literal crater. Well, not Godzilla, but he turned Japan into more of a wasteland than he's ever done over his entire tenure. Well, besides other movies, but this is he single-handedly helped destroy the entirety of the world, I think, if not just Japan. How are they going to, in a hypothetical scenario where they make a sequel, how are they going to respond to that?
I think the intention for Final, well, if we're theoretically, assuming that there was even any intention to even do a sequel to Final Wars, because, I think there was like an initial intent for Final Wars to be the last Godzilla movie to be made for a while, pretty much. Maybe not ever, but for a while. I honest to God do not have an answer. I don't
because it's all fucked up. It's destroyed,
Yeah, it's like I said. It's the world in Final Wars is in a worse state than the world post Codum, pretty much.
That is concerning to think about. Literally, the West has fallen. Billions are dead.
Oh yeah.
No, not east, west, north, southeast, southwest, northeast, northwest. All the east, north, west, and south.
All directions.
It's all gone. Billions are dead.
Nothing ever happens anymore because everything's dead.
Yeah. Like the only Godzilla continuity where the state of the world is more fucked than at the end of Final Wars is the Polygon trilogy. That is it.
True.
That's
Very
the only
true.
one.
I can't. I think. Okay,
Maybe
because
that
this
is
is.
maybe that is the plot of the next film. The survivors of the human race find the alien technology, build a spaceship, and begin to travel into the stars and make new civilizations where no man has gone before.
Isn't it funny though that all the characters at the very end of the movie look at Godzilla, they look up at him like, he's our savior, he's our hero, thank you Godzilla for beating the monsters. You absolute nitwits. He destroyed your world. You imbecile.
Now here's the thing, the Xiliens pretty much destroyed the world, Godzilla just kind of played a part in it, but the kid was mainly just cheering for Minula doing his like little atomic breath thing, but that's really... I don't think anyone else was celebrating because Godzilla saved the world. They were just celebrating like, oh, thank God, we're alive. It's over.
Well, they were like smiling at Godzilla. That's the thing. They were like looking over Godzilla, smiling like, yes, thank you. And then you got Manila smiling as well. Like, honestly, I'm surprised that fucker survived. He should have died along with the rest of the planet. But anyway.
And then you have like Ozaki at the very end saying, it's not the end, it's just a new beginning. It's like, a new beginning for what?
Adam and Eve, bitches. Adam and Eve. Number 2. New World Order.
The whole world is fucked. It's a new beginning.
I did just think, surely they're not the only aliens.
Oh no, where there's one, there's more. Which is why we gotta kill them all in the name of the Emperor.
So I'm just thinking of, have you guys played XCOM?
No.
In the first game, you fight aliens are invading. Oh, we're fighting all the aliens, and then the final fight is you go on their spaceship and you kill the boss. And then that game is like, yeah, you've killed the aliens, wonderful, and isn't everything great? XCOM 2, they do you see the end fight sort of. So there you go, they destroyed the alien spaceship, and then the camera zooms out, and there's 20 more of them, and it just says 20 years later, the aliens have basically taken over the world. That's how I imagine Final Wars 2 would happen. It's just like, yay, we've defeated that big ball in the sky. Here's 20 more just turning up to like finish the job.
Wouldn't it be super cool if the sequel for Final Wars was just Final Warhammer? Godzilla Final Warhammer. The Imperium of Man arrives on planet Earth, drops a Titan, and makes him fight Godzilla. Just like the Adeptus Astartes launching their attack against Godzilla. Wouldn't that be awesome? That would be cool.
There's also some pretty nutty plot armor in this film, or moments where our heroes absolutely should have lost during a battle, but the plot just doesn't allow them to lose. And a lot of this is a further extension of how utterly inept the Xiliens are as an antagonistic threat. So let's break it all down in exhibits, shall we? Exhibit A. So X starts to control the mutant soldiers, sans Ozaki, because they all have M-Base, and M-Base is what allows the Xiliens to control both mutants and most of the monsters in the film. He doesn't control Ozaki in this scene because I guess he just finds out that Ozaki is a Kaiser just like him, which we don't really find out until much later in the film. But then again, why didn't he just try to control him after he finished controlling the other mutant soldiers so that he would have Ozaki on his side as well? I don't know. But anyways, moving right along. So then with all the mutants brainwashed, not only do X and his goons leave as opposed to staying behind to make sure our heroes are properly disposed of, but all the brainwashed soldiers, including Kazama, just wait for our heroes to leave except for the one EDF commander as opposed to just killing them all for no reason. Now, even if we need the mutants to kill this guy because he's putting up that good of a fight all the way to the bitter end, why didn't some of them try to tail Captain Gordon and company as opposed to just Kazama being the one mutant to do so, all for the sake of having a one-on-one fight with Ozaki on the highway? I don't want to keep using the phrase for no reason for quite a few of these points, but it really does seem that way. At least without taking the meta into consideration, because in the meta, the reason would be because it's cool. It's cool to see the mutants commander making a last stand against his own troops who are all brainwashed as a part of a noble sacrifice. It's cool to see Ozaki and Kazama chasing each other and having a fist fight on motorcycles. But in the context of these mutant soldiers being brainwashed by the Xiliens who want our heroes dead, the logic in these scenes isn't all that tight, let's just say. Exhibit B, the siege on the mothership. So the Gotengo has to blast a hole into the mothership so that Gordon and company can drill the rest of the way into it and blow it up from the inside. Considering that they've seen the Xiliens being able to teleport to them or any location near the mothership earlier in the film, one can't help but ask about whether or not the Gotengo crew ever considered that being a possibility, like what happens later in this sequence. But I digress. During the battle over Tokyo, the Gotengo attempts to fire its main maser cannon at the mothership only for a barrier shield to stop the beam in its tracks, which means the Gotengo can't physically get past it. Oh dear, what are our heroes to do now? Well, don't you all worry, because Kazama, who has just come to by now, has hopped into a fighter jet and is about to turn the tide for his friends. So Kazama makes a suicide run into the mothership and is able to get past the barrier shield and fly straight into said mothership in order to deactivate the barrier shield. Wait, what? Film, you just established that the mothership has an energy shield that prevents an ultra-powerful maser blast from hitting the ship, and it's also preventing the Gotengo itself from drilling straight into it. So how can a lone human fighter jet be able to get past that shield so that it can get inside the ship and blow up the shield generator? At the core of the ship, by the way. Look, film. I know that this may seem like a foreign concept to you, but make that make sense, please? Exhibit C. Our heroes find themselves at the mercy of the Xiliens while Godzilla and Mothra have their big fight against Monster X and Gigan. Then X, my boy, reveals that him and Ozaki are Kaisers, which is this film's way of saying that they're super extra special and they have the potential to be extremely powerful. Next thing he knows, Ozaki finds himself getting zapped by X and falling under his control. He then gets the order to start attacking and killing his friends. So I mentioned this earlier, but it's worth reiterating here. If X had known that Ozaki was a Kaiser the whole time, for some reason which isn't explained in any way to where it may as well be, as one would put it, for no reason, why didn't he start doing the whole mind-controlling thing on Ozaki when they first met in the press room, so that he'd become a Kaiser meat puppet along with his fellow mutants? Oh, right, because if he did that, then Captain Gordon and company would be screwed, because Miyuki wouldn't have had the talisman at that point and time, and the film would be over. Exhibit D, and you're all gonna love this one, I swear. While Captain Gordon and his team battle the Xiliens, and just before Gordon himself gets his head cut off, suddenly out of the blue, the Secretary General and the heads of the EDF all appear to help turn the tide. The SG explains that his experience in military college helped them out in their escape, and that's all the explanation that we get for this. The reason why this is a problem is because of the following. First off, this is supposed to be a massive mothership with thousands and thousands of Xilian personnel with advanced alien technology, so the fact that these people were able to escape with no further explanation and reach the main room of the mothership undetected is quite a contrivance if ever I've seen one. And second off, earlier in the film, we clearly watched the Secretary General get killed by Rodan, and there was absolutely no indication that he was teleported right before then. Even when you go frame by frame, we don't see any old beam of light come down on the plane. We don't get so much as a flash of anything to indicate that the SG was teleported at the last second. The plane blew up, and he was inside it when it happened. The SG is dead, or at least he very much should be dead. But instead, in order for our heroes to survive this 4-on-4 fight with the Xiliens, we have to have something happen in order to save them, and we have to have a surprise payoff of the SG still being alive somehow, after having been replaced by an evil doppelganger earlier in the plot. Not to mention, why would the Xiliens keep these key people as prisoners once they've assumed their likeness? One would assume earlier in the film that keeping the SG alive was unnecessary in order to have a doppelganger in place, so him getting killed mid-flight seemed to be no loss for the Xiliens. But then, we get this Titan-sized continuity error where a character who we clearly see die is suddenly brought back to life for no reason as to how he survived for the sake of moving the plot forward. This is a plot-breaking, world-breaking error on the level of Space Mutiny, where in that film's plot, a character named Lieutenant Lamont is killed by the antagonist, Calgon, in order to cover up his plot to start an uprising for control of the ship, which is what we see him do to other crew members who uncover his conspiracy and threaten to reveal it, only for Lamont to be shown alive and well in the background in a following scene. By all accounts, Lamont being alive would change the plot quite drastically, yet this blatant error throws everything out of whack, and the fact that the filmmakers for Space Mutiny failed to recognize and correct this obvious mistake is quite astounding. So it's quite ironic that in the same franchise as certain films that Mr. Science Theater 3000 had done episodes for, we have Godzilla Final Wars falling into the same trap as Space Mutiny. How in Godzilla's Great Hollow Earth does that happen and be allowed to happen? Exhibit E, the Xiliens' marksmanship, or lack thereof. Yeah, there's no other way to put it. The Xiliens can't shoot for crap, or at least it doesn't seem that way. At least for their foot soldiers. For context, most of our heroes try to escape the mothership, only to encounter a garrison of Xilien troops who all march in and start entrapping them between a pillar with laser fire. It's very clear that the troops are trying to kill them, because otherwise why would they be shooting at them? And yet all their lasers don't seem to hit our heroes aside from a non-lethal shot at a couple of them, both times being on the arm, by the way. It gets to the point where your average stormtrooper from Star Wars could kill these people before the Xiliens would. Not only that, but our heroes are returning fire, but we don't see any indication of either side taking casualties until a convenient explosion happens much later on, once the mothership starts self-destructing, which wipes out all the Xilien troops just so that our heroes are free to escape. Is that a Deus Ex Machina? I don't know. I can't help but think that it's a Deus Ex Machina in a way. You know, pretty miraculous that the explosion happened to the Xiliens and killed all those troops there, but it didn't blow up our heroes. Just a thought, especially when a self-destructing mothership would have random explosions happening all over the place until the whole thing goes kablooey. Just a thought. Now on to Exhibit F. F as in final, because this is the last one. How did Ozaki defeat X at the end? Despite being a Kaiser himself, we still see him being outmatched by X in hand-to-hand combat over the course of the climax. But then suddenly Ozaki just gets up and, after a brief exchange ending along the lines of how he decides what he uses his power for and that humans are not cattle in a stand against X, while glowing with energy, he's able to outclass the villain and win the day. What did he even do here? How did this even happen? How did he unlock the ability to just win this fight?
For no reason!
Because it just seems like he was losing until he stopped losing and started winning. Like, what even changed? Oh, right, because the plot requires that he and our heroes would win and that the Xiliens would lose, and so that our heroes would end up helping Godzilla later on. So, basically, yeah, the plot armor in Final Wars is quite possibly on a whole nother level, and that's not even taking into account how utterly incompetent the Xiliens are as villains in terms of their overall plan, which we have gone over earlier.
Can I just ask, why would a super powerful alien who's more powerful than the other aliens around him, who has super duper silly powers, then tell somebody, oh, by the way, do you know you can have access to these super silly powers too?
You're a Kaiser.
I guess.
was just insane. Like, this guy had absolutely no idea that he had anything like this, and then this guy's like, "Oh, by the way, you can have these powers too."
I guess the whole idea was he's just so full of himself that it ultimately brings down his downfall. This is the same. Yeah, that's generally what I found with characters like him. They just have such a huge ego and are so high on themselves.
Yeah.
All the writing's just terrible, and they needed a reason for him to start going Super Saiyan. Even the reason he goes Super Saiyan doesn't make a lot of sense either. Because the stuff that made him go Super Saiyan was
actual Super Saiyan. It's friggin' pseudo Super Saiyan from the Lord Slug movie.
It doesn't. The plot doesn't make sense, which is really bad because I really like the bad guy in it.
Yeah,
he's just some of the stuff he does. The actor is very much into the role.
The actor is who makes that. It's a lot like Joe Brody. I feel like the character itself is a little unremarkable, but it's the actor who literally makes it.
Yeah.
Bryan Cranston.
If you gave that to somebody else,
I don't think his name for the Xilien commander. What is he?
I've been trying to figure that out myself, and I couldn't find anything about what his name actually is, to be honest. But yeah. Anyways, to kind of like go back on like the whole unlocking the guy's potential to be like Super Saiyan or Kaiser, as he's referred to, or rather like unlock the great power, all sorts of power within him. Like, so Ozaki like gets his ass beat by the Xilien commander, or the guy pretty much, basically, goth kid alien dude, and the alien dude's all like, "You ain't shit. You humans ain't shit." And for some reason, like, Ozaki like gets up and is like, "No, we don't. We are shit. We're the biggest shit in the universe. We're humans."
No, it's worse than that. But the best bad guy in all of cinema, says earlier in the film, you guys are just going to be our cattle now. And that's halfway into the film, which is ironic, weirdly before Godzilla has his fight. Then he says it again later. He calls people cattle again, and then explains why that's a thing. Like, we need something from you, so we need to breed you lots and then like extract it from you. We're basically going to treat you like cattle. And then he says it again, which then sets off the Super Saiyan bit. Yeah. And then the good guy has the worst line you could possibly add, where the bad guy says, all you humans are just cattle. And then the good guy stands up and says, "We're not cattle, we're people.
We're humans."
We're humans, Honestly, you just like, no, he's being metaphorical, you dipstick.
But here's the thing, so basically he gets his ass beat, but then for some reason, just in a few seconds, he gets up, and for some reason he's like winning, pretty much. I'm not even.
It's like in Versus Gigan, where Godzilla gets his second wind at complete random.
Yeah, that's exact. Yep, you're right. Yeah, pretty much. He just gets Ozaki gets his second wind just because we have to have him get his second wind. Yeah.
The second wind was silently imparted to him by Don of Frye. It was silent but deadly.
Don of Frye is definitely one of the best parts of the film.
Don of Frye is the best part of the film, and I straight up think he's one of the best human characters in the series. I'm sorry.
Yeah, the Secretary General, he's on his flight, and basically the plane gets blown up by Rodan. Now, considering how we know what the teleportation technology for the Xiliens work, there's obviously a beam of light that comes down, apparate them and what have you, or energize them like in Star Trek. It's like a pretty notable signature. That doesn't happen with the Secretary General before he gets blown up in that airplane. So I find it's hilarious when later on we pretty much see him on the mothership alive and well. to help everyone out.
Like to be honest, it doesn't really make sense. Like I understand that the aliens probably gravity beamed him away, but still he blew up in a plane. Like I know it didn't crash, but it still blew up.
He's dead. We did not. There's no beam for teleportation before the plane blew up. He was dead. How is he here?
There's no way that he gravity beam, because if he was gravity beamed, he would actually be dead, because that's Ghidorah.
Yeah.
Of course. I forgot about that. I'm kidding. Sorry.
Nothing about this, the whole Secretary General bit of story makes any kind of sense. The fact that he survives the plane crash, despite him clearly getting blown up before anything happens to him. But when he turns up later on carrying 2 guns, he's like, okay, so he's beaten up at least 2 aliens who are as strong as the mutant humans are.
See, Animus, you're forgetting the most egregious part of that scene. He says, I somehow managed to escape. That is a line that is on the same tier as somehow Palpatine returned.
Yes.
No. I was going to make a comparison there, but I think it's an undue comparison because in Big Trouble Little China, there's a bit where the old guy turns up to save Kurt Russell. He's like, here, take this rope. And they're like, how did you get up there? And the old guy says, it wasn't easy. And that's it. That's the explanation. There is no other explanation for it.
Yeah. Here's the thing.
It's like that. But at least the China Big Trouble Little China one, it's kind of like, yeah, we just needed him up there. Let's throw this explanation in. With Final Wars, he's not only survived, but he's also escaped his imprisonment and beaten up a couple of aliens to get guns. We need to throw something in to explain that.
Yeah, I pretty much would say that the case of the Secretary General turning up, despite being blown up in a plane much earlier in the film, is that the writers pretty much forgot that they killed him that early on in the film. So,
they noticed, whoops, we killed him, we accidentally killed him in the first act. Well, we may as well bring him back we may as well bring him back. And no one's going to notice.
I still think it says a lot about both this movie and Episode 9 that this Final Wars is still better than Rise of Shitwalker.
Well,
of course.
I mean that's not a high bar. We're not talking about a high bar.
Like every single every masterpiece has a ripoff. Godzilla Final Wars is a movie, and Return of the Skywalker is also a movie. But guess who ripped off who?
Well, I don't think Rise of Skywalker ripped off Final Wars. I think Rise of Skywalker was just written by people who pretty much gave up. They just said, "Fuck, I don't know. I don't know what to do with this."
I was going to say something about the fact that the alien spaceship seems to be like a 1,000 miles long for that guy to fly the plane in and travel as far as he did. But there's a bit where he comes out of the good guys drill air submarine thing, and they go, "Oh my god, it's you! No, what are you doing?" He's like, "I'm gonna save you guys. Don't you worry." He's like, "No, don't do it." And then he screams at the camera, and then the camera cuts, and then it's just him flying towards the spaceship because he hasn't got there yet. He's like, "Why did he scream?"
No. Here's the thing. The scene plays out as they're like, "No, I owe it to you, Ozaki," and Kazama's all like, "No," Ozaki's all like, "Yo, Kazama, what are you doing?" And then Kazama's all like, "Yeah!"
Yeah!
Yelling.
Okay, still going.
Yelling is how it answers the question. He's just yelling yeah!
It's like, that's not an answer. What?
And he does it again when he actually fly into the whatever it is he flies into. He does it again, and that actually sort of makes more sense. But just randomly doing it.
That's
imagine doing that in the middle of a conversation. So how was your day, dear? Oh, it was really good. How was yours? Yeah.
It's like, so what are you planning on doing today? Yeah.
Oh my god.
It's like, what movie are you? It's like, hey, welcome to AMC. What movie do you? What movie you plan on seeing? Yeah! It's like, okay, oh, okay. So Pride and Prejudice 2, Romantic Boogaloo. Then
I plan on seeing
No, it's when you do that and the guy goes, "Oh, so Godzilla Final Wars, yeah, too."
He's sacrificing himself. Let the man yell. It's like, no, when he's sacrificing himself, when he does that the second time, right before he blows himself up, it makes sense. But yeah, okay, I mean, I get that the yell. We get that, him yelling, to answer the question, like what he's doing is supposed to imply that he's about to risk his life and he potentially sacrifice himself. Like that's supposed to be an answer of sorts. Yeah. And Ozaki is supposed to able to figure out what he actually understand what he's trying to do. It's just kind of funny. That's really all it is.
I like the idea that he was flying towards the closing door hatch Hannah thing when the conversation ended. I like the idea of him flying towards him, thinking, "Oh shit, I'm going to hit the doors. Better do my heroic yell now." Ah, and then he doesn't hit the doors, so he goes, okay, okay, we'll keep going.
Okay, no, here actually, oh my god, I've just thought of, holy shit, I've thought of something. So basically, the reason why he's flying in there is to take down this barrier shield that the maser cannon couldn't even blast into the mud.
Shit.
So wait a minute. How the fuck is he able to fly into the mothership? There's a shield.
I completely forgot there was a shield.
That's why he had to blow up the shield so that the Gotengo could penetrate the ship. Oh no! Fuck.
Is there potentially bad writing in this film?
Really? There's no way.
I'm coming, Elizabeth.
Don't worry. I'll meet you there.
I think you need to make a short about that.
I'm not really an animator, so that'd be a funny little parody.
Don't worry, Elizabeth. Wait for me, and you'll know what's coming.
No, it's like, I'm coming, Elizabeth. Yeah!
Don't worry, guys. I'm going to say bang.
Shit. Yeah, it's the same thing of in Return of the Jedi when they had to blow up the shield generator so that the X-wings and Millennium Falcon and what have you could get down into the core of the Death Star to blow it up. It's the same thing, pretty much. So how the fuck is Kazama if they have to get through the barrier shield? How is Kazama able to fly through the barrier shield?
He's got that anime protection. Okay. He's got that fucking My Hero Academia quirk shit protection.
I think in Star Wars there's at least it used to be. There was a difference between energy shields and physical which is why they were able to shoot torpedoes into the Death Star rather than laser it, because they had a ray shield around it. So in Star Wars, at least there's a difference between an energy shield and a physical shield. But in Final Wars, this shield is not talked about or used enough for us to have any kind of distinction. So yeah, as far as we're aware, that shouldn't have worked.
No, it should not. Absolutely not. Oh, wow.
And in which case, if he could just fly that little plane in there, why couldn't they just flown the air submarine into it?
Oh yeah.
Shield or no shield.
Yeah, I genuinely
fly a big ass thing in there. Also, how come he didn't have a parachute in the jet?
Well, I don't even know. Well, where's he gonna parachute into? In the mothership somewhere? I don't even.
Wait, You said the mothership was like what, 1,000 meters?
Yeah.
Okay, so then, then that entire flight, him going in, then he would have had to steer it. So, okay, then yeah. No,
It was he was going to do a suicide. Whether there was a parachute in that jet or not is kind of beside the point because he was doing a suicide run no matter what.
True.
So when it comes to the human characters, well, there's only a handful that stand out in a meaningful way, those being our hero Ozaki, Captain Gordon, and our villain, the Xilian commander, the younger one. Ozaki, our main protagonist, is shown to be a man willing to put his life on the line for others and is more about saving lives than taking them. This is demonstrated when, even during a training session, he pins Kazama, his hot-headed comrade, to the ground with his hand to his throat, in order to get him to surrender, a gesture which costs him a win during the session, once Kazama rejects it and beats him. Ozaki holds the position that one should have a conscience in order to protect people, which he sticks to in moments such as when he takes a bullet for Miyuki from the Xilian doppelgangers, and when he brings Kazama back to the Gotengo to recover after their spar on the highway. When he finds out that not only does the M base in his DNA connect him to the Xiliens and Gigan, but also that he's a Kaiser that is susceptible to following the Xiliens' footsteps in dominating the universe. He doesn't allow the potential for evil in his blood to decide his destiny for him. It's only when X brainwashes him, though for a short period, where Ozaki has that choice taken away from him, and so Miyuki has to use the Infinite Island Talisman to bring him back to the light. So there isn't really much else to go on about this character, but there is like a decent enough foundation to him despite it being pretty light overall. If anything, I would just kind of say, well, I guess he's like a nice, pretty cool guy, I guess. Questions about his competency as a leader aside, X is still shown to be pretty entertaining and a pretty fitting antagonist for Final Wars. A commander who demonstrates a great deal of power, yet his overconfidence and underestimation of his foes are what seal his defeat. Not to mention, Kazuki Kitamura does such a wonderful job playing this character, and it's very clear that the sheer amount of enjoyment that he's having playing as this character is quite transcendent. Whether he's enjoying causing pain unto others, giving some subtle looks with insidious intent to betray his superior, or throwing a tantrum when the monsters at his disposal are losing, X stands as a very entertaining villain, even when the writing surrounding him is, well, kind of a mess. And of course, we have to talk a bit about the manliest man's man to ever be man, Captain Douglas Gordon. Now, is he the most complex and most layered of human characters? No. But he's still nothing short of sheer awesomeness, and he's arguably the best character in this entire movie. In fact, I would argue that Captain Gordon is the embodiment of mankind's will to face any obstacle or challenge and to persevere, even when up against insurmountable odds. He stands as a strong leader who, even when things seem dire, and even when all limits are being tested up to a breaking point, encourages and orders his team to push forward so long as there's even a small glimmer of hope that victory can be achieved. Captain Gordon is the kind of hero that would make President Whitmore from Independence Day proud, because he will not go quietly into the night or finish without fight. He's even a bit like Godzilla in a way. Now, bear with me on this. They're both the strongest of their kind and will stop at nothing to fight to save their planet until they either win the day or die trying. And despite the two of them being bitter enemies, and despite Gordon being the one to lock Godzilla away in an icy prison, Gordon understands that the world needs Godzilla, and though it's not a decision taken lightly, nor is it one that he would ever imagine doing under any circumstances, he still makes the call to reawaken Godzilla in the hope that the day will be won against the Xiliens and the monsters which they command. And much like Godzilla, Gordon is willing to set aside the bad blood that's between them after some convincing, when there's no more fight left that should occur, so that future generations could have the chance to live in a world without constant war between man and monster. It may not be the most one-to-one comparison out there, but upon closer inspection, it is kind of interesting how similar Gordon and Godzilla are, despite being bitter enemies. The rest of the human/alien cast isn't much to write home about either, unfortunately, but they could be worse. Miyuki Otonashi gives Ozaki someone to interact with aside from his mutant comrades, while also sharing some fun little banter with him, and she does have a little more purpose in the plot than a mere tag-along as an anchor for Ozaki to maintain his humanity. Kazama serves as a rival for Ozaki, sharply contrasting him in terms of what they each value in their duties as soldiers for the M organization. While Ozaki tries to think about how to protect people, Kazama mainly focuses on destroying the enemy regardless of what that may cost. Then when our heroes are in a dire situation, Kazama saves the day by laying down his life in order to clear a path for the Gotengo to penetrate the ship. It would have been much better if how we got this made a lot more sense than it does here, based on some of the issues I mentioned earlier about the barrier shield and all that. But at least he went out like a Chad. And then you have the late Akira Takarada playing the Secretary General as well as his doppelganger, doing rather well in portraying the sophistication and sense of altruism of the former role and the uneasiness and suspicious tics in the latter. There isn't much to say in terms of depth regarding this character, but the contrast between the real SG and the alien pretending to be him is well conveyed by the actor, as well as some of the nuances, dare I say, in the writing. Like when the doppelganger gets tripped up by some of Anna's questions, and when she brings in a dog as a way to entrap the alien, since he wouldn't know the name of the SG's dog. Overall, the writing for the characters themselves is fine, which is quite surprising considering the film's heavier emphasis on style and spectacle over everything else, including solid storytelling. I wouldn't call these characters multi-layered by any stretch of the imagination, but there's at least some things to be said about a few of them that can actually be mined from upon closer inspection. So, yeah, I think that just about does it with all the bits and bobs in Final Wars, which means it's time for us to get into the concluding section of this particular essay video. Let's get into it, shall we? So, it's very safe to say that Godzilla Final Wars isn't exactly what one would call peak cinema. Maybe peak schlock cinema, maybe, but certainly not the kind of cinema that one would typically describe the likes of Oppenheimer or Top Gun Maverick or Godzilla Minus One as. There's things in this film which I cannot help but enjoy and even kind of love, from the action sequences to some of the characters, including the Don himself. But this is still a film with writing that just has way too many issues to overlook or defend because of the instances where it sacrifices logic and coherence for the sake of a cool moment. The plot falls apart under even the most mild of scrutiny, and it's also we can get to the next piece of spectacle, as entertaining as such spectacle may be, in what one may call the biggest example of the rule of cool being followed at the expense of everything else that I can think of in this franchise. We even have a character suddenly come back from the dead because the filmmakers seem to have forgotten about him dying in the first place just to move the plot forward. Do I even have to elaborate further on why that's an issue? So, in conclusion, Godzilla Final Wars is entertaining, I will not deny it, and I'd have a good deal of fondness for it myself, but if I were to be honest, it's still pretty bad in terms of overall quality. Maybe not the worst written film in the franchise, but it definitely could have used improvements, especially with it being a 50th anniversary celebration of the King of the Monsters and his legacy. And with all that said and done, that just about does it for my essay video on Godzilla Final Wars. I would like to thank you all very much for watching, and I hope that this video fancied you all to check out the rest of my content, both from the past and in future. And in regards to what I have in store in the near future, all I can say is this. Expect more Longmen, no matter how long those may take going forward. Just expect more Longmen. Maybe some not so long men, but definitely expect more Longmen. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that. Once again, thanks for watching, and I will see you all later. Long live the King.